Hello, I'm Jeff Sizewar, and I'm so excited to bring this content to you guys today. We're going to be talking today with Madrigal, in particular, Parth Patel, and I'll introduce him in a moment. And we're going to be going through accelerating AI governance maturity from principles into practice. And this is such a unique topic, in particular, in the pharma industry, being a highly regulated industry. And we happen to have an extremely innovative organization, and the leader of this from an AI and data science, Parth Patel. Parth, would you mind introducing yourself?
Great. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Jeff. And hi, everyone. My name is Parth Patel. I'm a global head of AI and data science at Madrigal. Thank you for having me, Jeff.
Of course. All right. Well, today we're going to talk about a few things. One is just kind of the pulse check. What's happening in AI governance today? We're going to show you a little bit of advisory services. Our group is designed to help organizations take this, as we said, from really theory to full practice and full implementation across the board from people, process, technology, typical kind of consulting garb, if you will. However, very hard in the AI governance world is a new market. And we're going to talk about how you measure this, measure maturity and the things that you might be seeing in the organization. And then I'll be turning over to Parth just to talk about the journey that Magical went on here in a few minutes. And we're going to go from there. All right, so let's jump into the pulse check. Next slide. So some things that we're hearing, when you start to see AI and you're reading a lot of the hype out there, we're starting to see, people saying, listen, we're doing a lot of AI, nothing's making it to production. It's costly, we're not moving at the speed that we'd like to. And there's a number of other issues that we're seeing and obviously risk from reputational damage we're seeing in the market, some of the competitors and some of the things that are happening. But I think when you look at this, you start to see, are we showing ROI on AI? And, I think when you look at that, it comes down to the ROI, but that's important. But AI governance is a big part of this because how do you bring these things to market and into production if it's not effectively governed when you're dealing with sensitive data in any case? AI projects, again, if you're not making it to production, then how are you showing ROI overall? What are you doing? And then the safety and the incidents that we're seeing everywhere across the board. And part, I think this will be near and dear to you with what you guys do, of course. This is a very big deal for you guys. When I look at this, though, from just stepping back and what I'm seeing personally, I think most of the people that we work, say, in the organizations that I see, often it's that the AI projects aren't moving as fast as they need to move. They're not connected to the business as a critical part of what they're doing, and they're running slower, right? There's a perception of speed and AI governance getting in the way. And that perception is often because they don't have the right stakeholders, the right tooling, the right structure. And I see a lot of folks trying to do a really good job with AI governance and just not getting the stakeholder buy-in to move forward. Everybody wants it, they're saying they're doing it, but actually executing against that is kind of still in that more immature state. I'm curious to get your perception. Like, what are you seeing out there? What did you
Yeah,
see?
no, this is great point, Jeff, and this is consistent to what we are seeing across the pharma and biotech life sciences industries as well. These are the consistent themes, the pain points, barriers that everyone's facing. And primarily, as you mentioned, right? So there are two major factors to this. One is, we want to use AI on every single thing that we can get hands of. So really, the issue here is that the destination is not, just AI everywhere. It's really about AI that we can trust everywhere, right? And this is where the second major barrier to AI comes in through the governance piece, right? This is why governance is so important, so that you have that stakeholder buy-in, you have that trust with your stakeholders, so you can deliver faster, safer outcomes for patients, for business stakeholders, right? So
Yeah,
very consistent with what we've seen in the industry.
yeah, that makes total sense. It's thank you for validating that. I appreciate that. Next slide. So we're going to talk a little about what is Credo AI and what do we do to help people from an advisory perspective. This is a big part of our programs and things that we do with the organizations. So let's go to the next slide. Well, Credo AI has been delivering trust through AI governance for some time. We've been around for roughly a little over 5 years. I think what's interesting is we recently had some great validation, not only from the industry and our customers, which is what really matters, but even Forrester putting us as a market leader recently. So we're really proud of that. And again, it's not just our platform, but a big part of that is our platform, but it's the ability to operationalize AI governance through the advisor services and build these programs and get these things really working and helping our customers mature and really start to use this at scale. So we're really excited about that. But moving to the next slide, we've been actually, one of the things that we've used to kind of unlock this has been our advisory services. So this is really a team of experts and forward kind of deployment AI engineers that really, and AI governance engineers that really are built to support this. I mean, when you look at a tool like this and what we're doing, AI is very unique to each organization. They have different regulatories. Each organization operates globally. We have to kind of wrap this program around the organization. We can't force the program or force the organization to adhere to our tool and say, here's our SaaS application, you should use it and just turn it on. That's a recipe for failure. It doesn't work that way. I don't know if I've ever seen a customer that's been ready for a platform, quite frankly, when I've worked with them. And we'll talk a little about that with Parth here in a minute, but this is really what we do. We really enable and onboard people and build these programs and help them build that maturity. So to that point, the way we start a conversation with our prospects and our customers, and we even our current folks when we're looking at this is where are they in the journey of AI, in the AI governance journey, if you will. And some folks can be at the beginning of this saying, I know I need it. We're going to push for AI. We need to get some tooling in here. We're in level one. We see some people like we have some policies, we know some stuff, but we don't really execute against those policies. We're not really there. And then we start to formalize. We start to see some spreadsheets coming around. We start to see some use cases popping in from different organizations and different part of it, disparate parts of the organization, if you will. Level four, we start to see this mature. We see these programs coming. Level 4+, now we have governance programs in place, maturity. And level five, we have this fully operationalized, fully automated, and we have continuous monitoring happening, and life is good. And this is where we see, and this is obviously doesn't happen overnight. I'd be curious, Parth, if you don't mind, where did you kind of start at this journey? Can how did that look for you?
Yeah, and that's a great question, Jeff. And one thing that I do want to highlight here is that at Madrigal, we are not treating AI governance as a project, a 6-month project. This is a program, and this is going to be a multi-year project, or sorry, a program that we are eyeing, right? AI governance maturity aligns and has to and must align with the AI maturity at the organization, right? So, like everyone else, we started with our discovery effort, right? This is what we have currently. We started with something, and now, with Credo's help, we were able to actually move up the ladder that you're seeing here for with different levels, right? About formalizing, about standardizing, and then it's about scale, right? And then with scale, you'll get speed because now you have a lot of things automated. You have governance running in the background smoothly, so, right? So you're not compromising on speed at all, right? It's all about creating awareness and trust, and that's what we are doing here. That's what we are doing differently at Madrigal.
I love one of the things you said there, which is we have to be aligned and running at the same pace of AI. And I think that's one of the challenges I often hear from organizations is AI is moving at warp speed and our AI governance program is slowing it down. And often there's a number of reasons. We'll talk about why that's happening. But I really enjoyed you saying that. And the point is like we have to be aligned as AI moves fast in the organization. We have to make sure AI governance isn't slowing it down and it's moving in parallel with it. I think that's a really amazing measurement to think about for organizations in that perspective. So I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Next slide, please. So let's talk a little bit about this fairly quickly. I don't go too far into each one of these, but I do think it's important that our customers and our prospects and folks joining this call have a kind of a barometer, if you will, of where you're at in this process and what you're thinking about. And I think we're all working on these programs and we're trying to do this, but sometimes just hearing it from third parties can help us to really recognize this. And, when you look at this level one and you see, what are we seeing? Well, we're getting minimum funding. We don't have the buy-in. We have, we're worried, we know we have legal reputational exposure. We have no defined ownership. We're very reactive. Somebody asks us, we're like, sure, let's go figure something out. But it's not, there's no proactive program, which is going to lead to some other things. So then we're starting to think about how do we educate everybody? How do we start thinking about a policy? Who owns this program? Who should own it? What are the stakeholders needed to actually build a program at the beginning of this? And this is common. I mean, this is what we see. I believe this is probably fairly close, part of where we're at when we started with you, kind of putting this together. And that's really important. I don't, unless you feel differently, Parth, I don't think people that come in, they're working on these programs are really ready for a platform just yet. They're really kind of operationalizing and putting the structure together before they bring this noise in and all this data and all these information. It's like who does what and what does that look like? Next slide. Perfect. So we move forward down this and we sort of move up, I should say, you start to see other areas like the business challenge here, like inconsistent expectations across team. Who's doing what? Are we doing MRM? What is an AI use case? What are we thinking about? And you start to see duplicate effort. You see, John in marketing is doing this with AI. And, I see this other AI use case over here. And we have redundant AI use cases because we're not reporting on them. Security is getting requirements from multiple people. There's a number of frustrations and things happening in the organization. There's a lot of rework that's happening. Engineers and developers are frustrated. Things are getting slowed down. There's no consistent methodology methodology and it's kind of rising. And that gets into kind of that decision of paralysis analysis and over engineering what's happening. And now it looks like it's a program that's difficult and you're having problems getting funded. And what you really want to be is starting to operationalize this. You're centralizing your documents. You're starting to connect the teams and helping them educate and learn what they should do, and starting to think about the context of each business unit because they're not the same, whether they're in Europe or US, and marketing versus sales, whatever they might be. There are different use cases. AI is very personal to the organization, and we have to make sure we do that. So this is kind of level two. And let's go forward to level three. I'm just going to continue to run through these relatively quickly. As we get to level three, we're starting to see some use cases come in. Spreadsheets are getting out of hand. There's a lot of regulations coming in. I have some broken intake process typically that I'm trying to work through. I don't have a good workflow of what's low risk, medium risk, and high risk. We haven't really established that. And so you end up with like this clogged highway, if you will, where people are looking at this and saying, why is AI governance so slow? AI governance saying, why is the business, why can't they give us this evidence? Why can't they do that? And you start to see this kind of conflict occurring, and you start to see these use cases somewhat stuck when the reality is the risk levels that if they're associated properly in the workflows and the escalations, 80% of those workflow, these use cases should kind of float right through and just get documented and move forward. You might have 10, 20% of these that escalate up to a higher tier. And that becomes very important because that starts to get into, it starts to show other things like the talent gap. Do we have AI experts on staff? Do we have, why is this occurring? How are we scaling this? And how are we measuring it? What are SLAs? If I don't know and I'm an executive and I've got to approve an AI engine or AI model or something that we're doing, and I don't know AI and I especially don't know AI governance, it's going to be slow for me to approve anything unless I'm properly trained and understand it. I'm not going to want to take that risk on. So how do we educate them and make sure they understand the SLAs and we don't have all of this great work coming out through AI and just getting stuck for 6 months and not hitting production because there's all of this risk and concern, especially in a highly regulated company when we've all been trained so much to reduce risk in the organization. And nobody wants to take that on and say, I'm just going to let this float and hopefully it doesn't impact my users. And you start to get to more efficiencies there. Perfect. Thank you. And as we start to move forward here, again, you start to see level four, a lot of burnout, a lot of friction, a lot of tools. And the problem is, you might have some of these use cases, but you're pulling evidence from 18 different tools. Your users don't really know where to go in and where do they actually put an intake process in? How do you put this in their workflow? You need to really bring this into what they're doing today. You need to bring it into, if you have another GRC solution or ML ops engines, all these tools have, your shadow AI, you really want to start driving this automation and orchestration because that's really what AI governance is. You need to move from manual to automated and that maturity model so you can continue to see your program scale and automate. There's also, when you go here, if you don't have those workflows in place, you will kind of create a bit of an issue for yourself, right? I mean, if you don't think about, these workflows effectively working through, and you all of a sudden you add these more use cases in addition, you're just creating a bigger bottleneck, if you will. So it's very important to think about this and how we can help you orchestrate and work through this mapping and this process, especially in a Fortune 2000 in a complex organization, even like yourselves parts. Okay. And finally, utopia. When we look at this, ultimately what you're getting here is AI governance has really become a business benefit to you. It's continuous monitoring, it's occurring. We have reporting, we have structure, and this is functioning across the business, it's embedded in the things that we do. And it's a big part of our program. And this is really where, everyone is maturing to. And I think there's a speed of this. If you want to do this today, you could. There's a cost to that speed. I think most people are, I think Parth going down the path you are, which is I'm going to mature my organization over time. I'm not going to disrupt. I'm going to build. And it makes total sense. But this is certainly where we want to be, especially when you start to get into auditability, where you have controls. Do you know 100% of visibility where your inventory is? Do you have lineage of how this model is being used across the organizations and what happened, what risk level? Do you have additional validation points if something happens or changes to go through that and reevaluate that again? That's where we're getting at in that level 5. And it's a really great program when you get there, quite frankly. But again, you have to look at that cost of investment to get there. So these are the 5 things. And if you go to the next slide, the 5 levels of maturity, the thing I would recommend for everyone is just to think about where you are and where you want to be. I think, that's the main thing here. And this was what we always do, what we did with you as well, Parth, is like, are you a level 1 and you want to be a level 4? Great. Let's show you a plan and show you how to get there. And that's what I really wanted to show you guys today. And I really want, if it's okay, Parth, I would love to turn this over to you and learn about your journey as you went through this motion and hear about how Madrigal did this. Obviously, you're highly regulated, have an amazing innovation, and you're affecting a lot of lives.
Thank you, Jeff. Next slide, please. Today, I would love to discuss, why AI governance matters within pharma and biotech space, right? And in pharma and in biotech tech, if AI model fails, it's not just a small error. It can delay approvals, force costly protocol changes, and ultimately put patients at risk, right? And that's why AI governance isn't just a red tape. It's how we move faster with confidence. And specifically in pharma and in biotech, trust and safety aren't optional. They are really essential. Our data sets are, often complex, our endpoints are nuanced, and every decision carries consequences for patient health, regulatory timelines, and also a stakeholder value and trust, right? So without this right guardrails, clear policies, and strong technical controls and fully auditability, AI governance or AI usually, in our domain introduces latent risks, silent risks, right? If you still go back there, so, stakes are high in the biotech, but the upside of getting governance right is just as significant, right? So, meaning you'll have faster trial startup times, fewer amendments, models that are inspection ready, and there's a clean path forward from early development within pharma domain to even the commercialization, right? And this is not just about um, R&D side of pharma, right? This in commercial, a misguided AI could push us into an off-label risk. In HR, an algorithm could introduce bias and legal exposure, right? And in finance, for example, a faulty forecast could undermine SOX compliance and or misinterpret our cash runway, for example, right? So the governance isn't really here to slow us down. It's the mechanism that lets us scale AI across end-to-end value chain in biotech and in pharma. Next slide, please. So with that, I would love to actually share some real world evidence on risks and incidents that has happened, right? So these risks aren't hypothetical, right? We've already seen these consequences of weak AI governance in healthcare and in life sciences and beyond. Just to share a couple of thoughts here, an example, right? For example, there's a risk around bias and fairness. A facial recognition system can misidentify minority groups, for example, right? If it's not trained on a equitable data sets. There's a safety concern, right? AI system, which is failing to block harmful content, leading to potentially patients harm. There's overall safety risk, right? So AI system privacy risk, right? So, for example, health data of hundreds of thousands of patients could be exposed through poor safeguard. There's validation gap, right? So, risk models trained on unbiased data without proper oversight, and that introduces tremendous risk on the governance side of the models, right? So the lesson here is clear. Without governance, AI really amplifies risks. And with governance, we build that trust, protect patients, and keep our business inspection ready. Next slide, please. So, with that in mind, when we talk about, again, AI in pharma and biotech, like I said before, it's not just about speed and innovation, it's about trust. And there are three major, sort of risks that I want to sort of, highlight here in my webinar today is that, the first one is fairness. Models that are trained on biased and incomplete data can produce faulty results in the market that doesn't match with what we saw in the real world, right? That inconsistency basically breaks trust with patients, with regulators, with providers. So governance ensures that fairness checks and bias monitoring are standard, protecting trust and preventing us from losing our customers and also credibility in the market. Second risk is around privacy, right? AI system don't work well, for example, with HIPAA out of the box. With governance, we risk exposing personal health data. Without governance, we risk exposing personal health data, creating both civil and or criminal liabilities, right? But when you have when you have a governance guardrails in place, you have automatic PHI detection, eradications, audit trails, right? So we avoid these violations and reputable damages that comes with that. And lastly, some of those risks are around performance, right? AI models used in trials can fail in ways we don't expect, generating false positive data, false negative data. It could be subgroups that are, there are blind spots around subgroups, right? So that doesn't mean that you just wasted some time. It also means patient safety issue, costly drug recalls. It could mean delay of months, right? So with governance in place, we set validation checks, monitor things up front, and that overall prevents the performance risks that from ever reaching patients or regulators, right? So these are the essential risks that there are latent risk within our domain that I wanted to highlight that could be easily tackled with a proper governance structure and framework in place. Next slide, please. Yeah. So, now that I mentioned about risk, I do want to highlight what are the challenges that AI governance faces, right, in pharma and in biotech, right? So, one of our biggest challenge that we face is fragmentation, silos. Each function, for example, R&D, medical affairs, regulatory, commercial, HR, finance, legal, right? So all the corporate side adopts AI, for example, at its own pace without its own tools, right? With their own tools, right? So without a unified governance framework, that means that we are creating a lot of blind spots, we are creating duplications, and also uneven risk management. So fragmentation or silos are, one of the biggest challenge in pharma today. Second biggest challenge is around regulatory complexity. We sit really at the intersection of multiple overlapping frameworks, like there's an FDA regulations across the globe, there's GXP compliance, HIPAA, GDPR, and there are new AI-specific laws like EU AI Act, right? That has emerged in recent times. Without smart mapping of these different complexity of different, overlapping frameworks, we risk creating different rule books for each regulations instead of having a single comprehensive consistent standard. So that's the biggest challenge. One of the biggest challenges that we face is the complexity in our regulatory environment. The third biggest challenge that we see is that AI systems themselves are opaque. Without lineages, version controls, subgroup performance matrix, we can't really explain how a model was trained, validated, and how it performed across patient populations, right? So, building that trust, having that explainable AI, it becomes an essential part, and it's still a challenge in the pharma domain. And finally, there's a tension between how fast we will move and how much oversight is needed, right? So our scientists, our commercial teams, our corporate leaders, they want a quick wins, they want quick adoption. And on the other side, we have our legal, quality, and compliance colleagues that needs evidence, right? So the solution here is not really a bureaucracy. It's really about embedding policy and governance as a code, so that we can generate this automated evidence, so that governance runs in the background and speeds adoption instead of blocking it, right? So with these challenges in mind, where governance comes in, it really ensures that our AI gets more powerful, but also it stays reliable, compliant, and explainable. Next slide, please. Yeah, so that brings us to my last slide, which is around how we think about future of pharma and biotech, right? Where are we? If you're looking at 2030, what does that tells us, right? So the picture is clear to me from where we've seen across the industry that by 2030, pharma will be AI native. But getting there requires one non-negotiable foundation, and that is AI governance embedded from the very beginning, from the start. AI is really moving from, isolated models to large language models to multi-agent system to generative AI, right? And multi-agent system and generative AI, right? That operates across the enterprise. These systems will help us design smarter protocols, for example, generate submission-ready documents, monitor patients in real time, and ultimately, improve patients' life and also improve organizations' efficiency and productivity. Uh, but here's the key. Without governance, the risk compounds. With governance embedded, the opposite happens, right? So AI really becomes a driver of the speed and trust in across the organization. And it means that pharma company that respects privacy by design never mishandles patients' data. It also means that pharma companies or biotechs that performs accurately and efficiently, right? Which further reduces clinical trial timelines, avoiding rework on certain things, and also speed cycle times, review times, right? And importantly, it also means that future proofing our autonomous decision making, right? So as agentic AI systems begin to take on higher order tasks, governance ensures that they always operate within human defined rules, transparent, explainable, and accountable. Right. So, like I mentioned in the very beginning, I'll again voice it over here. The destination here is not just AI everywhere. It's about AI that we can trust everywhere. That's what will deliver the better, faster, and safer outcomes for patient and the business alike. So with that, over to you, Jeff.
Yeah, Part, that's amazing. I really love the perspective there. There's so much goodness, and I think you said so much in regards to even like embedding this, and it reminds me a little bit of when we went through the security process and putting it in the SCLC, and what happens if you don't, and how much more expensive is it later if you got to remediate. It's kind of bringing that in, but it's a little bit more ambiguous because you're bringing policies and you're bringing in risk that is not quite as simple as a typical vulnerability that you might
Yeah,
see that's in it get a rating, right? You've got to kind of determine that rating system that you're working with. It's really fascinating where you guys are at and what you're doing in the market and the industry. And we just absolutely love working with you guys over there and the innovation you guys are bringing to the market. So appreciate this part. Really learned a lot. I'm sure hopefully everyone else did as well. And just let us know if you guys have any questions.
great. Thank you.